Okay, this is a brief review of the WEN 2000 watt inverter generator. There's tons of YouTube videos out there that reviewed this generator already, but I want to do just a short review for you. The first thing I want to talk about is the difference between an actual AC generator and an inverter generator. The electrical current in America is AC power, and it runs at 60 hertz. 60 hertz is directly proportional to the speed of the generator. So for an engine to spin an AC generator, it has to maintain a very precise controlled speed to maintain that 60 hertz. If it doesn't maintain that, if it varies above or below that RPM, what you'll get is a dirty power or a noisy AC signal, and that's not very desirable at all for electronics especially. One of the things you'll see on, like, say, Harbor Freight, for example, there are tons of generators out there, AC generators, and they're actually very affordable. You can get 5,000, 6,500 watts for $400 or $500, a great generator. And that's not to say that AC generators are cheap and bad. It's just that they may not be as good or as smooth of power as an inverter generator. An inverter generator, this is actually a DC generator that's inverted to AC current. And what you have when you run it through an inverter, you get a lot smoother, more controlled 60 hertz, and you get a lot better voltage control. And what that'll equate to is a better signal for electronics. Computers, televisions, anything electronic really hates a noisy signal, and that above and below 60 hertz can really be a problem. In fact, if it gets too bad, it can actually damage electronics. So these inverter generators, they're a little bit more on the smaller side, and they're more dedicated precisely to electronics or small appliances. They're not. This is not for an RV. Another thing I want to talk about is the rating of the generator. This is a 2,000 watt generator, but that's 2,000 watt peak. This is actually 1,700 watts continuous. And actually, if you run it at 90% load, it's 1,530 watts is what they prefer you to be at, 90% load rather than 100. So, but when you start, there's two types of load. When you start an electrical load, there's resistive loads and there's inductive loads. A resistive load is like a heater, for example. If you have a burner on a stove and it's say for instance, a 1,000 watt burner, when you turn it on, the power goes up to 1,000 watts and it just stays there. And resistive, that's how the nature of resistive loads are. An inductive load is like a large electrical motor. And with an inductive load, if you have a motor, say, running 1,500 watts, and it's running at 3,600 RPM, and you put a heavy load on that motor, it's going to draw more power to try to maintain that 3,600 RPM. So what happens with an inductive load is when the motor is turned off and it's just sitting there and you switch it on, it immediately wants to try to draw as much power as it can to get up to, say, 3,600 RPM. And what happens is there's a huge inrush of current above and beyond the, say, 1,500 watts normal operating power of that motor, and it could peak to, say, for instance, 2,000 watts. The point is you have to account for that peak when you're speccing out your generator. And so you say, oh, this is a 1,500 watt, this motor draws 1,500 watts, that's fine. Well, what does it draw when it peaks, when it first starts, or it's put under a heavy load? For like an air conditioning compressor is a really good example of that. So this is really just basically a 1,500 watt generator. Now, one of the things that's really cool about this, and you can tell, is it's actually tailored more to the average home user that doesn't want to, power an RV or some construction site or something. It has a 12-volt DC cigarette lighter plug. It's got two USB for charging tablets and cell phones, and it's got one circuit breaker, regular AC house type circuit breaker. This is run at 14 amps, so it's typical of a household circuit breaker. So that's really good. I mean, and it's everything I'm going to need. I see myself charging drone batteries, charging electronics, and possibly playing a TV with this, but more importantly, keeping my refrigerator running. And I'll check that out and see if I can demonstrate that in the video for you. Okay, before I get started doing the operational test here, I wanted to mention 3 more things about this generator. First is the ground. There is a external ground here that a lot of times in a lot of the videos on YouTube, you see people not using this ground. The generator will run perfectly fine without hooking up a ground wire to this, but you should try to use it if you can. If there's a short electrically from any of the components in the generator or the inverter to the chassis or the frame of this generator, you could grab it and get electrocuted, and that's why this is here. So you should always try to use this as much as possible. I just happen to be set up pretty good. I have a ground out back on my pool pump that I'll use, or I have one for my ham radio station that I sunk into the ground. So I have a couple good grounds around the house that I can use this for, and you do really want to try to use this. Next one is the eco mode switch right here, on and off. The eco mode, with it off, you have the full range of throttle and capacity of the generator available to you. With eco mode on, that's for low loads from 0 to say 1,000 up to 1,000 watts. And what we're trying to do here is this reduces the RPM of the generator, keeps the generator running really quiet when low loads are expected. It'll still ramp up and down as needed in eco mode, but if the power draw is too much, you'll get an overload alarm. So if you're just expecting to use this for light loads, if you use it in eco mode, the gas will last longer, the generator will run quieter, and it'll still be just as efficient. And the last thing I want to mention is this fuel shutoff position on the throttle. And turn it on to start. When you get ready to shut the generator off, you go to the fuel off mode, and that cuts the fuel to the carburetor. What that does is that allows you to the generator to run the float bowl of the carburetor empty, and then it'll just run out of gas and stall, rather than shut the generator off and leave the carburetor full. So if the generator does go into storage, then the carburetor won't get gummed up from old fuel. So those are the last things I want to talk about. Let's see if we can get this thing started here. Okay, that's eco mode on right there, and it's quietest. It actually quiet down just a little bit more if I put a load on it, a small load, but that's pretty quiet. I mean, it's not loud at all. And this with eco mode off, full range of throttle. Still pretty quiet in my opinion. Okay, there it is. So you saw that little dip, and the overload light came on, the dip in the engine sound, and then it came right back up. That was my refrigerator starting in eco mode. So I pretty much proved that it'll run in eco mode, although I'm kind of concerned that the overload light did come on momentarily. That's it. It weighs 40 pounds, costs $380. The WEN 2000 watt inverter generator. Very happy. And I'll dress up and make a better grounding cable for it. I'll put a lug on it so I don't have to use that big ugly clamp. And otherwise than that, I think I'm good to go. See you guys.